Okay, we're going to shift over to our panel discussion here. So panelists, come on up and join me. Thank you, sir. All right, I think we're modeling for a new boy band with these headsets, right? It'll be a global sensation. So continuing on kind of the path of talking about cities and eSports and this vital partnership, I've got some esteemed colleagues, some old friends and some new friends, and my trusty sidekick here. We want to dive right in. I would love to take 1 second to introduce from my left to my right. You all take each a minute to give a quick overview of who you are, but Christoffer Melin, immediately on the left. Christopher, you want to go ahead and kick it off?
Hi everyone, my name is Christoffer. I'm coming from a background within the eSport and gaming industry for, I would say, almost the last 20 years. I started with an event called DreamHack in 2005. I've been working with that for many, many years. But today I left that part and working with my own company and supporting organizations such as DreamHack or Encom to product develop eSport and gaming events and festivals around the world. And during my time at DreamHack, I actually were working a lot with destinations. So I had a chance to meet Loren and Ed in Raleigh. I've been to China, talking to destinations, or to Australia, or other places in the US. So a broad expertise from the eSport and gaming world when it comes to doing events.
Awesome. Our newest friend, Arturo Castelló.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Arturo Castelló. I'm the founder and director of Encom. We are based in Valencia, and I've been working in the industry since 2010. I had the luck to work with DreamHack since that year. And we were bringing DreamHack outside of Sweden for the first time to Valencia. And I've had the chance and the opportunity to work with the city and with different publishers and different contents. And also we are, since last year, launching this new initiative called Valencia Game City. And we want to do something very similar to what Loren explained just before. We want to create a hub of gaming and esports in the city of Valencia.
Excellent. Ed Tomasi.
Yeah, Ed Tomasi. I've been in the esports industry for close to 25 years. I didn't originally start off in esports. I originally had a marketing and advertising background, working for an ad agency and working for a tech startup company back in the late 90s. And my experience, I think, coming into esports is unique in a sense that I was never a competitive video gamer, but I identified esports as the new and upcoming form of entertainment for this next generation. And I've been working with destinations such as Visit Raleigh and others, mostly in the North American, Canadian market and the Caribbean market, to develop their strategy, their unique esports strategy in hosting, not just hosting esports events, but also developing esports programs within their country amongst school systems, amongst youth programs, and even amongst adult programs as well. Because as we all get older, the market for gaming and esports grows with it. It doesn't always stay with the youth. It grows into 50-year-old competitive gamers.
Got that right. We're going to jump right in. I think one of the things that we wanted to kind of establish right out of the gate, and I'm going to let Ed take this first question, because I don't want to make the assumption that everybody in the audience fully understands the difference between esports and gaming and games. So Ed, if you would take a second to kind of kick it off with a few words and kind of the differentiation between both esports and gaming.
Yeah. So I think the first thing we'd like to look at is sort of the market size. And I've read, reports that the current total revenue for the global esports market is somewhere between 1 to 1.5 billion US dollars. Now, compare that to the global gaming market. So esports being a subset of the gaming market. The gaming market is somewhere between 175 to 200 billion dollars. So it's relatively small, but we're just at the beginning, I believe, of this esports evolution, because I think we've already gone through what's called the revolution, right? What's new and innovative, and now we're looking to grow this and integrate this into society, into culture. Another component thing to think about too is like, what are esports and what are games and what is gaming? And to me, and I think for the audience today, esports is about very highly competitive competitions using video games. It's often said, and I didn't make this quote, so I have to give credit whoever is out there in the universe that did, that while every esports game title is a game, not every game is an esports title. And I think that's where you start seeing that market, like it's just a small percentage of the market. Gaming in general could be anything from mobile games that everyone can play while they're commuting in transportation, or just taking to take a break from everyday activities. Whereas esports is a very, very specialized, very professional, has a very dedicated athlete that has to compete at a very high level across the world. And while esports a lot of these tournaments culminate to a live event, but a lot of them start online, and that online can cross continents to identify the best in the world. So I think it's really, again, important to understand that esports and gaming, there's a difference. And I think understanding that difference is a great first step in understanding how to design your destination's unique strategy.
Awesome, thank you. Christoffer, much has been reported about the esports winter. I just made some comments about it, where leagues are pulling back, professional teams are failing to generate value, service providers are consolidating or even failing, and publishers and developers are laying off staff. That has made the news, certainly stateside. Yet the demand for live in-person esports events has never been greater. Multi-part question, right? How are esports event producers being affected by the current market changes in your eyes, and what are you seeing?
No, but I think as it is right now, the producers are not so affected, but I think it will come. I think you see the esports industry is still young, and many times we say that 1 year in esports is almost like dog years. It's 7 years in. It goes so fast into esports. So I think what we need to understand is that you don't know exactly how sustainable this business is yet, or you haven't found a recipe for how to be a sustainable business. So a lot of money has been invested over the last 10 years into esports and gaming, and now it's time to really understand how we can make use of those money into this business, I think. So I think many of the large companies such as Blast or EFG, there is a tough time coming now after the publishers are starting to withdraw their funds for events, where they need to understand how can they make effect of this money, how can they build events and make sure that they restructure their business.
Second part of the question, what are some of the emerging trends you're seeing between publishers and maybe destinations as it relates to risk and responsibilities, and maybe kind of shifting some of the financial responsibilities over to partnerships?
No, but I think as events are growing right now, there are an expectation from the esports producers that there are some money, of course, a transactional view on it, where you get some support coming to city, but also there is more to understand how to host an esports event. I think when you look at a DreamHack festival, when you come in and do an event for 24/7, that's not the usual thing for a convention center, since they're usually open between 8 and 5 for a typical event, and then you come in and say like, hey, we want to be here 3 days, 24/7, then that's a challenge to understand what our actual demands are. And especially then they're saying like, yeah, but then you need to pay overtime for all the staff that are working. But that's not a financial model that works for us. We need to understand that we need to pay as a regular event, but maybe act as a esports gaming event in that sense. So it's tough. It also comes down to all the infrastructure around the event. I think you mentioned it before, right. With hotels, we go in, we empty out hotel rooms just to build a practice room for the teams. we always rely on dual internet connections to make sure that the broadcast always can be live, because if it goes down, there might be a vita to pay to the game publisher because we can't broadcast anymore.
Awesome, thank you. Arturo, some cities are just starting their esports journey. I had mentioned we're 5 years into ours, while others have established themselves as global destinations for large championship events and annual festivals. Every city must decide what they want to bring from the outside and what they want to build for themselves. You're heavily involved with DreamHack Valencia and your role. What are the challenges and opportunities you've experienced in that, and how do you approach both to succeed?
I think the biggest one is education, and it goes both ways. So you have to be lucky to find, as an organizer, to find someone in the city, on the council level or state level, that understands what this is about. Mm-hmm. Now it's getting much easier because it's more recognized. But imagine 10 years back, 20 years back, it was very difficult to get someone of those places to understand and have the vision that this was going to be something interesting. I personally have been very lucky both in Andorra and also in Valencia because I had a chance to meet officials that understand this. And I said it goes both ways because organizers and also publishers and teams and all the ecosystem also have to understand what's in it for the cities and how do we have to work in a way that makes sense long-term for the cities and the destinations. Because otherwise, if we see it as an opportunistic opportunity, so to say, it's not going to last. So I would say the first one is education. Mm-hmm. and also it's very difficult for everyone to understand where this is going. So maybe a city representative or a country representative, they think that the best thing they can do is to attract one very popular global tournament, and they want to invest in that, and maybe 2 years later, that tournament doesn't exist anymore. Right. So you just want a lot of money, right? So how do you explain to them what this ecosystem is about, because we don't even understand it sometimes, right? and how do you balance that thing that you said that I like between build and bring, and how that connects in a long-term way. So I think the main challenge is education, and also connect with all the city and region ecosystem, because it's not only the official that you sign the deal with, you also have to attract the tourism people, the education people, the industry people, and that's how you build something which is long-term.
Yeah, and in my keynote, we talked a little bit about measurement and metrics. What is it that you're using where you find success for that?
We've been looking into other industries like music festivals, sports festivals, so we try to copy them because they are very advanced. So we use basically the same that you used. And I think it depends on the cities as well. For instance, reach. If you do an event in Paris or in London or New York, maybe reach is not that important because they already have a brand positioning. If you do it in a city like on a place which is not like those popular destinations, I think it's all about reach at the beginning. Because also we forget that it's reach to a very difficult generation, because they don't normally follow all the media, traditional media. So right. This is a way to get reach for a good price as well, as you mentioned. Right. If you were to get that reach on traditional media, which they're not going to see anyway, it will be much more expensive. So I think at the beginning, reach is important, and you have to be patient.
Excellent. Yes, Ed, you want to add that?
I was going to say, too, Arturo and also Christoffer, I think the one thing that we all agree on is that eSports is constantly changing. If you think about traditional sports, there are subtle changes in rules. You know, maybe in the U.S. they recently put a rule in for baseball pitchers to pitch the next pitch within a certain time frame. That's kind of unique and interesting. But for esports, there's constantly updates to games, and some of those updates affect the way professionals have to play the game. And it just constantly evolves. So if you think about that, it's so episodic, the games. And so we within the industry are always having to adjust to these changes, whereas sports, I feel they don't often have to adjust to the changes as quickly as we do in esports. And then the other component of esports is that the window of selecting a host destination and then producing an event is much shorter than most other professional sports. Whereas, the NBA championship or the
Super Bowl,
or the World Cup, everybody knows when those events are, and the governments to prepare player visas, they have plenty of time to put applications in and get everything in order. For esports, it's totally different. And one example of things that we struggle with sometimes is player visas and getting the best global esports players into a destination with only 8 weeks preparation, because they were just identified as winning a qualifier to be the best representative of their region or their country, and some of them don't even have passports, right? We're teaching the up and coming players to get all of that and be prepared for that if they're sort of on a trajectory. But again, just going back, it always, for us, there's a constant change, and with that, we ask a little bit of forgiveness with our government and with our destinations, because we have to roll with those changes, and they have to understand the pressures that our ecosystem sort of puts upon us, and we have to change to consistently be at the best level.
Awesome.
I can just add in, I think it's also not only on the player side who's the best in the world, it's also the games that are changing. It's like, imagine there's a new version of football every 3rd to 4th year. That's happening at the same time. So there are many games that are been there for 10, 15 years that are strong, but many others come, they rise, they're doing great, there's good numbers, both on like players and viewers, but then they die 3-4 months later. So it goes very quick in this industry as well, and you need to adapt to that.
Yeah, great follow-up points. Ed, I'm going to kick this one back over to you. We often talk about the approach in which destinations and esport event producers must take to mutually succeed, right? And while it is true that cities and economic development groups are looking in to invest local funding and other relationships and resources in esports events and programs, we have found that forming partnerships, right, there's that word again, yields more sustainable and longer-term opportunities to invest those funds and resources. What are some ways that you're seeing both cities and esports event owners, producers can approach each other in a partnership, intentional partnership glide path?
Yeah, you had spoken about it earlier in your slide about the transactions and measurement and the traditional ways destination and markets measure the performance of an event, and that's a very traditional sense, and we as esports producers and consultants always have to teach that basic math, because it's important to you, it's important to us. When it comes to the longevity of a relationship, you want to build partnerships in the sense of understanding what your goals are, not just for the short term. Okay, I'm hoping to bring this one great event that has a tremendous amount of economic impact across a 3-day period. But what about the before and the after, not just the during? And that's where partnerships really come into place. I think when you look at any relationship in business, you have to look at it from a sense of trust, and with that trust comes a sense of understanding what your goals are and what my goals are. And the transactions are one part of it, but understanding what your pain points are. So for example, if you're producing an event and you've got contracts for a venue that say that your setup period is only a 3-hour period, when you're setting up lighting and computers and LED backgrounds, you're talking about a day, 2 days maybe, and those contracts need to reflect the understanding of esports and esports production. So having this partnership is about having the conversations and changing certain rules because esports requires it. And if you don't change, if you consistently look at this as a transaction only, you might only just have that one event, and it'd be so painful to produce that one event that no one wants to come back to your destination. Whereas if you put together a package where there's economic incentives on the front end to encourage people to give you proposals, and there's economic incentives on the back end, so rebate programs, tax incentives, governmental support and resources, I think that shows this partnership and shows the trust, and I think you'll start seeing repeat business for your unique destination.
Yeah, and I do think risk mitigation becomes a part of that too, as it relates to going from a one-time event to a multi-year event. That reduces the risk. The producer and or the publisher and the host community have a tendency to get to know each other, really, to your point, define those objectives and can work through that. Christoffer, we're going to kick one back over to you here really quickly. Major esports tournaments and festivals are often hosted in arenas, convention centers, stadiums, and other specialized event production facilities. However, event producers often must plan for other elements, considerations to produce a successful event. What elements and considerations have been challenged by that through cities, and how can we help resolve or support some of those challenges that come up?
I think we touched on it a little bit. You said it before, Ed said it, I said it just before this as well, when it comes to understanding the infrastructure and how important it is to actually be able to move freely with timings, with enough bandwidth, good power, good connections. I think those parts are one thing, but I think also it's super important for us as an event producer to look at the overall destination, how welcoming it is, how to get players to the destination. I think my travel here yesterday from Barcelona is maybe not the easiest one compared to going directly to New York or something. So I think there's a challenge for minor cities to host the larger esports events, but at the same time, there's an opportunity there as well. Because when you come to a smaller city, you're often the event, the happening that's happening in the town. And you could feel like in a good city, I would say, I never hosted an event in Raleigh, but when I was there, I could feel it like how the community comes together, both on a visitor side, but also on a business side. And I think those parts are what builds the most successful events in the end. As an example, I think in Katowice in Poland, they're hosting one of the largest esports tournaments in the world in Counter-Strike. I've been doing that for the last 10 years. And they were rebranding from being a coal city to being a gaming esport tech city. They really want to bring new industries to their home. So I think when you work with a city or a region that actually want to build from the bottom up, not only pick the top events, that's when you see a difference. And I think that's when you can do a difference as a smaller city as well, and not being a tier one that maybe has the best connections or the best city branding.
Yeah, and I think, again, that's reflective in some of my comments about really when you start to develop your ecosystem, really looking hard at your venues, existing venues, and how can they be rolled into the esports space. I know another area that we've run into a few times that I think we've kind of corrected through education and strategic advisory is on the hotel side, right? A lot of times we see with the bigger events that come in, it may be 200 to 300 rooms that are used by the publisher and the producer and the staff. Players are there, but players need to practice, right? They need either in-hotel space to practice, or in some cases we get requests to literally remove beds, case goods, take it all out, right? Typically the reaction from the hotel is, well, where are we going to store it, right? So you have to kind of figure out the workaround. The other thing, not unlike venues, is internet and kind of wide open internet. We were looking at an opportunity through, I believe it was Counter-Strike, through one of our producer partners, and they needed up to 4 gig, I believe, in that hotel. That hotel had about 1. They had immediately go back out and look at their technology provider to see what the upside cost was going to be to increase that pipe. And then the question became, who's going to absorb that cost? Does it go back to the producer? Is the hotel going to pick it up? Is the destination going to step in with some sort of incentive to do it? And I think ultimately what we landed on was that we were going to split costs. Some of it was equipment specific, and we were going to get behind it in a grant so that equipment would always be there moving forward in the future for the hotel. Long story short, we lost the business not because of the equipment, but because of the visa issue, right? Wow. It was a very short cycle. Again, U.S. has got more than its fair share of visa issues. Many of the qualifying players in a short window of time are coming out of South America. Couldn't get in, Brazil in particular, couldn't get into the U.S. in that period of time and ended up going to Mexico.
Yeah, and that's a good example of partnership over transaction, right? Because you have an esports producer that has a requirement. That requirement then is asked of the venue that's hosting either the players or the event, and sometimes both. And they didn't have, they had to upgrade their equipment in order to accommodate the esports production. Well, who's going to cover that cost? And that's where I think the destination came in and shared their relationship with their corporate partners,
right.
The internet service providers, the technology providers, and said, this is different. You need to do me a favor to do them a favor, and we'll share the costs so that it's not burdened upon just the esports producers. That act in and of itself is reflective of markets that want to be partners with esports versus ones that just want to host and just want that the transactional success.
Yeah, and I think again, kind of just to add on to this point one more, we'll move on to the next question. Again, these are all examples where we've kind of lived and learned. We had a situation where we had an event coming into the building, into our convention center. It was not an entire building event. They didn't take all the space, they took a portion of the space. And our convention center will at times book multiple groups, though what they refer to as stacking business. It may be a traditional meeting, it could be an esports event, it could be a traditional indoor basketball sporting event. The esports producer wanted pretty tight security through one of the main connective points to the main hotel. This is an underground escalator system that goes into the exhibit hall level. Well, the building agreed to do that with the producer, but failed to notify the other group. And we ended up having some inclement weather, and the meeting attendees wanted to go through the connector to get to the convention center, and were denied because they didn't have the right credentials associated with the esports group. We had to kind of step back and kind of live and learn in that. And moving forward, we have to work very diligently again with our building around some of the security protocols that have to take place sometimes. So again, Arturo, you want to jump in here?
It goes both ways because, for instance, the example that you mentioned that we also suffer a couple of times, that the qualifier and the finals are so close together that it's impossible to get the visas, and the flight tickets cost goes up to the roof, right? So whose fault is that?
Right.
Because sometimes I think that we as an industry need to professionalize ourselves and standardize the processes. So the cities and the venues, for instance, they do maybe 100 events during the year, and maybe do one esports event. Why do they have to adapt to the esports event? Because the industry is still young and amateur at some points, right? So I would say it goes both ways, and we have a long way to go as well.
It definitely does, and I know, in certain instances we've worked with, again, the biggest and sometimes the smallest just within the esports space, from the EAs and the Riot Games all the way down to some local and regional producers. One of the things that, and I talked a little bit about in my keynote about having key staff designated to this segment, again, to understand those nuances, to know that maybe a local or regional event host, whether they're either tied to a publisher or producer, or they're just wanting to put on an event around a game because they're a passionate member of the community. It's that what we refer to as kind of hand-holding process of standardization of event management and event curation. So to your point, Arturo, it most definitely works both ways. Great point. Let's jump back to you with a question, and this is around education. So education about esports is something we all agree that needs to be more of. And again, shout out to Judith and Jordy and Andorra Business for putting on this event so we can learn from each other. What areas do we need more education in your professional expertise, Arturo, and what city partners need to be involved in that education?
Well, I think this is where the biggest opportunity is right now, because it helps everyone in the industry, both the operators in the industry and also the destinations. So I think things like eSports City Talks and many other conventions and events that are organized around the world. And we do need to involve everyone from both parts. So I don't know if your experience, but sometimes it's not so easy to bring the gaming development people into these kind of events, because some companies and people there think they're two separate ways, as you mentioned at the beginning of your intervention. I think we need to make that connection, because one of the KPIs is how many companies we are going to set up in the city because of this, and most of those companies would be game development studios. Right. So we have to involve everyone from our part and also from the destination. And I would say the first one is, of course, tourism is one of them, education is one of them, and how we can work together in creating a better perception of gaming for cities, because we all fight with that sometimes, right? With that perception, the gaming can be sedentary, gaming can be addictive, and many other things. So how can we work together to change that? And also with innovation and economic development. I think one of the, I would say maybe even better than reach and all the other KPIs, one of the things that we bring to the table is we bring innovation. Mm-hmm. For instance, I always say that the first live Twitch streaming in Spain, we did it together in 2011, I think it was, with a StarCraft tournament. Yeah. So at that point, it was possible to come to our event and understand what Twitch was and what the streaming was going to, how that was going to change many things, right? So what is going to be the new thing, maybe in marketing, maybe in some other kind of business activities that we can find first in eSports? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big opportunity to connect with startups, entrepreneurs, economic development and all that. Yeah.
But I think on the education part, I think it's also important that as a city, for example, they are establishing one person or one department that actually works with esports and gaming in general. Because I think it's super hard to come to a new place and you're talking to someone in a destination bureau that don't know about esport or gaming. Then it's like we don't speak the same language. But as soon as you go to Raleigh, for example, and you talk to Ed, he knows exactly what I'm talking about. And I think the most successful events we have done is with cities that actually invested into esports and gaming. As Malmö, for example, they have one person working to map out the whole local ecosystem, a little bit what you guys did, and coming there and say, like, we need support with this, we need to find the board gaming community, we need to do this. They have everything. That makes it so much easier. And this person can also talk the local political language as well to explain what esport actually is and what the benefits are.
Yeah, great point, Christopher.
Yeah, I was to say, from an educational perspective too, every destination has higher learning educational institutions in some way, shape, or form. And when we talk about education, we talk about industry education, we talk about professional education. I think the next conversation that we all need to have is having the education conversation around our youth. And are they learning about esports, and are those institutions developing curriculum or programs that are in step, in connection with the destination, with the esports community? I think you will find in the next, say, 10 years that institutions are going to integrate esports into traditional curriculum. So it's not so much I have a degree in esports, it's I have a degree in communications, or I have a degree in sports management, or I have a degree in hospitality with an esports concentration. And so having those people graduate into our workforce is going to make our lives in the esports ecosystem a lot easier, because those are the valued people that we can then hire from. So, and a lot of those skills are transferable. So, you know, as students learn to live stream a tournament or manage a team, those skills can be applied to real life, whether that's managing a team at work or at school or within your community, or and, you know, being a leader for your community. A lot of that stuff is transferable, and maybe we're motivating the youth through esports, but at the end of the day, I think as destinations and countries look at their educational systems, they should look at how esports can play a factor in developing the education across all industries that they.
Yeah, and I think kind of to add on to that again, in the realm of case studies, Ed and I had the good fortune of spending some time with two gentlemen from Iceland about a year and a half ago that had started an esports academy in Iceland, in the country of Iceland, at about 500,000, I think pretty close to the size to Raleigh for the entire country, started to give sports grants to families that could apply to traditional sports to get youth involved in soccer or hockey or any other sport, including esports in Iceland. And those credits, in essence a tuition or a user fee to register, could then be applied to the esports academy system they built in Iceland. Hugely fascinating. Not sure if there's something like that that exists in Andorra, but again, with a smaller manageable population, those are the exciting opportunities.
I have a question there. I don't know if you know any case of a person coming out of an esports academy becoming a pro player, or maybe a person coming out of an esports business degree creating an esports company. I think we're still a bit too early, right? But we don't know any case of that.
Maybe we saw one yesterday at ACA esports.
Yeah, that's
where
one.
We have this driver that went from the digital to the F4 in France.
Yeah.
One case that we just saw about 2 weeks ago, a small institution in Raleigh, William Peace University, about 3,000 students. It's what we refer to in the U.S. as a liberal arts college. The esports space, both esports administration, game simulation, game development, are all bundled under one umbrella. It's their largest curriculum now. It's about 160 students of the total population. And they've got 20 alumni that came out of that program that are working at Epic Games. So there is a tangible connection to the 2-year, 4-year collegiate training moving into not pro player, but working behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, that example in Iceland was really interesting because the program helps coach coaches.
Right.
And that's, I think there's such a need for that, right? Because even if you're at in the US, we call it the Parks and Rec level, which is a very community-centric, youth-oriented sports and activities program. And they're at all various community levels, whether it's at the province, county, or the municipality, the town. Some even have statewide parks and rec programs. But there's so many people that want to volunteer. There's parents that want to be coaches of their children's team, but they don't understand how to set up a team or how to set up a tournament or what to coach the kids. Right? And so programs such as the one up in Iceland was a great example of a program that's coaching the coaches.
Or training the trainers, right?
Right, yeah. Training the trainers and coaching the coaches. And that's really important because I think as we see more of those programs established with the proper curriculum and the proper infrastructure, I think that's really going to make an impact at the community level for esports.
Yep. We got about 7 minutes left. I'm going to throw this question out to any of you. What's a good approach for cities looking to build their own annual esports tournament or festival? Arturo, I know you've got a lot of experience in the space, but I think a couple of quick bullets around.
I think it's very interesting to connect it to someone which is outside of the city. Be it an international tournament, a national tournament. So you have this connection between, because esports is a global ecosystem, esports is online. it's very recent that we think about destinations, because before esports, you could be playing with anyone from, depending on the server, but the teams were multinational, right? So we are trying to do this on the opposite way of how other sports started, right? So I think you have to find how many players you have in your country who play each game. It's very difficult to bring something that doesn't exist already, right?
Right.
And also try to make it and connect with the proper people in each community, and also connect it with something outside. That's, in my opinion, my experience, that's the best way to go.
Yeah.
But I think to build on that a little bit, when you look at, one part is the esports events, of course, but when you're looking at a festival event, it's not around esports, then it's more about gaming as a lifestyle element. So you come there. So for example, as DreamHack, it was the biggest LAN festival in the world. In Jönköping, we brought almost 10,000 people with their own computer, sitting there for 3 days playing games. But what that have turned into today is something totally different. One part is esports and gaming, but it's actually a social event. So it's like taking Facebook and put it live 3 days in one location. So the people that you talk with online or play with online, you meet in one location for 3 days. And I think the important part here is that it's built from so many different communities, because you have the gamers that are playing the Counter-Strike or Dota 2 or similar games, but then also to attract more females, for example, to a gaming festival, you have the cosplay component, which brings in females, and then you compete in cosplay. And then you have another one, which could be a music element with electronic music. So it's very broad today what gaming are compared to eSport. eSport is really, really only the top.
Yeah, and you're seeing more of that, Arturo.
And to note that, I think it's very important to balance the participation and the spectating. So I'm a believer of participation events. So we have a KPI, which is how many stations, how many things a visitor can do at the event. Because if we go back to, and of course the big tournaments and big events like IM and all those, of course they add value, but if you want to build something that lasts in your city or in your region, participating gaming is about playing. And for us, it's important to have probably more participation in playing, so free plays for everyone, local tournaments, amateur tournaments, and then something which you can watch and learn and in an aspirational level.
Yeah, and when we mentioned Riot Games in the case study, I was kind of blown away that none of the other publishers that we've worked with at this point, they actually brought an outdoor component to an indoor event. So they had a cultural event going on out in the parking lot outside the arena, heavy following of League of Legends in the Asian community, and they brought in some cultural assets from the Raleigh area in food and fashion and art specific to that. It was a really cool activation. It gave the fans a moment to step away from literally watching 8 straight hours of League of Legends competition, to step out, get some fresh air, again, gather amongst the community to meet and be friendly and build more community. So super exciting. Final question, okay? This is for anyone that wants to jump in. I'm going to call on all three of you, though. What are you encouraged or excited about for the future of esports in the near term? Christoffer, we'll go left to right. Make it easy.
I think what I'm looking forward is to when everyone actually understands what gaming is or what you do around gaming, because I think that's the challenge now. It's education. Everywhere, if you go to talking to a new client that's not endemic in the business, it's always about education. What type of target groups, how does it look like? But I think give it 10, 15 years, then everyone is a gamer. Or everyone maybe are a gamer already today. I would say my grandma playing Candy Crush all day in the sofa, she's a more gamer than I am, but she doesn't identify as a gamer in that sense. So education, I think, what I'm looking forward to.
Awesome. Arturo?
I'm very excited about some innovations like active gaming with VR.
Yes.
And also I'm very excited about Web3 gaming. I think it's going to be maybe a bit slow, but I think it's going to be similar to what Twitch made for the industry in 2012, this could be a big change as well.
Awesome. Ed?
Yeah, I think I'm most excited about the exchange of information and culture. Gaming is global, and I would never have had the opportunity to meet so many people that were living the same track, business life, but just speaking a different language and living in a different country, had it not been for esports. And I think the thing that makes me most excited is that as more and more communities and destinations and cultures celebrate and elevate gaming and esports, that it allows our world to exchange thoughts and ideas and celebrate more together with a new sport, right? And I agree, I love football, the soccer version, very much so. And that's sort of like that kind of growth over the past, 20, 40 years, at least for the United States, is growing. I see esports and the excitement of esports just growing so much faster, as you talked about, like 1 year is 7 years. Yeah. So I think that's what makes me most excited about the fact that, the world is really embracing esports as that next sport.
Great way to wrap up. Let's give it up for our panel, Christoffer, Arturo, and Ed.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Here you go, bud.